Hi everyone, welcome back to Ms. Bertazzoni's Reading Corner. We're going to read 3 more stories today from the Sideways Stories from Wayside School. The first story is about the 3 Erics. Now, I don't really like this story. I'm going to read it to you anyway, but I really don't like it. And I don't like it because the 3 Erics are stereotyped. What does that mean? That means that people in their classroom are judging them based on how they look as opposed to how they actually are. They assume that because one of them is heavy, all of them are heavy. They assume that because one of them is clumsy, all of them are clumsy. They pick up and they give them all of the same characteristics because they have the same name. And you should never judge people based on their name, what they look like, what they sound like, how much they weigh, none of those things. You judge a person by their actions, not by other characteristics. I used to tell my journalism students that my son, Michael, was the only person I knew who had both an aunt and an Uncle Dave. And you could never determine whether a person was a boy or a girl based on what their name was. So here we have the story about the 3 Erics. And I'll tell you honestly, I've adjusted a few of the words in here just because I'm a little offended by it. This book was written back in 1978, and what people said in 1978 isn't exactly the same as what we say today. So that's the end of my long introduction. Let's get going. Here we have the story of the 3 Erics. Okay, there they are, all 3 of them. The 3 Erics. In Mrs. Jules's class, there were 3 boys named Eric. Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and Eric Ovens. They were known throughout the school for being heavy. Eric Fry sat at this end of the room. Eric Bacon sat in the middle of the room, and Eric Ovens sat at the other end of the room. There was a joke around Wayside School that if all 3 Erics were ever in the same end of the room at the same time, the whole school would tip over. Eric Bacon hated jokes like that. That's not surprising. After all, he wasn't even heavy. In fact, he was the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jules's class. But nobody seemed to notice. The other 2 Erics were heavy, so everyone just thought all 3 Erics were heavy. But I'm not, Eric Bacon insisted. What's your name? Asked Jason. Eric, said Eric Bacon. Then you're heavy, Jason concluded. And pretty soon, skinny little Eric Bacon, the skinniest kid in Mrs. Jules's class, had the nickname Fatso. That's not a very nice nickname. Eric Fry really was heavy. He was also the best athlete in Mrs. Jules's class. His body was solid muscle. However, nobody ever noticed. The other 2 Erics weren't very good at sports. Eric Ovens was clumsy. Eric Bacon was a good athlete for his size, but because he was so skinny, he didn't have much power. So naturally, everyone just assumed that Eric Fry was also clumsy and weak. After all, his name was Eric. Now, this kid probably grew up to be a linebacker or a Major League Baseball player. Whenever the other kids chose up teams, Eric Fry was the last one picked. They never noticed his home runs or the fabulous catches he made. Like all great athletes, he made the impossible look easy. Of course, the other kids did notice the one time he dropped the ball. Eric Fry was playing right field. Terrence belted a deep fly to left field. Eric Fry raced all the way across the field after the ball and at the last second dived for it. He caught it in midair on his fingertips. But as he hit the ground, the ball squirted loose. "Well, what do you expect from Butterfingers?" said Stephen. And ever after that time, Eric Fry had the nickname Butterfingers. Eric Ovens was the nicest person in Mrs. Jules's class. He treated everyone equally and always had a kind word to say. But because his name was Eric, everyone thought he was mean. Eric Bacon was mean because everyone called him Fatso. Eric Fry was mean because he always had to play right field. So naturally, everyone just assumed that Eric Ovens was also mean. They called him Crabapple. "Good morning, Alison," said Eric Ovens. "How are you?" "Lay off Crabapple, will ya?" answered Alison. "If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all." All three of the Erics had nicknames, and that might have been better. Otherwise, when someone said, "Hey, Eric," no one knew which one was being called. One time, all of the Erics would answer, and the next time, none of them would answer. But when someone said, "Hey, Crabapple," then Eric Ovens knew they were talking to him. And if someone said, "Hey, Butterfingers," Eric Fry knew they meant him. And when someone said, "Hey, Fatso," Eric Bacon knew that he was being called. Now we know today, Fatso, Butterfingers, those aren't nice nicknames at all. Neither is Crabapple. So just be aware, don't call people names. Okay, end of lecture. Here is the story about Alison. Can we get Alison in focus here? There's Alison. Okay. Alison had pretty blonde hair and always wore a sky blue windbreaker. Her windbreaker was the same color as her eyes. She was best friends with Rondi. Rondi had blonde hair too, but she was missing her two front teeth. Alison had all her teeth. Alison used to say that she knocked Rondi's teeth out. Alison was very pretty, so all the boys in Mrs. Jules's class teased her, especially Jason. But Alison said, "Leave me alone or I'll knock your teeth out, like I did Rondi's." The boys didn't bother her after that. One day, Alison brought a tangerine for lunch. She took the peel off in one piece. Miss Mush, the lunch teacher, walked up to her. "Alison, may I have your tangerine?" she asked. Miss Mush always gave food to the children, so Alison was happy to give her tangerine to Miss Mush. Miss Mush shoved it in her mouth and swallowed it in less than 4 seconds. Alison left the lunchroom and walked down to the library. The lunchroom was on the 15th story. The library was on the 7th. Alison already had her book. She just went to the library because it was nice and quiet there. The librarian walked up to Alison. "What are you reading?" she asked. Alison told her the name of the book. "That sounds like a good book," said the librarian. "I never read that one. May I borrow it?" The librarian always lent books to the children, so Alison was glad to be able to return the favor. She gave the librarian the book, then walked down the stairs outside to the playground. All of Alison's friends were playing freeze tag. Alison didn't feel like playing. She reached into the pocket of her sky blue windbreaker and took out a tennis ball. She bounced it a couple of times on the ground. Louis came up to her. "Hi, Alison," he said. "May I play with your tennis ball?" Louis always gave balls to the children. Alison happily gave her ball to Louis. Louis threw the ball all the way to the other side of the playground, and then he went chasing after it. Alison didn't feel like doing anything. Jason ran up and tagged her. "You're frozen," he said. "Get out of here," said Alison. Jason shrugged his shoulders and left. Alison went back inside and up the 30 flights of stairs to Mrs. Jules's room. The lunch period wasn't over yet, but Alison didn't feel like doing anything else. She had given her food to the lunch teacher, her book to the librarian, and her ball to the yard teacher. She went inside to the classroom. Mrs. Jules was there. "Oh, Alison, I'm happy you're here," she said. "I'm having trouble with an arithmetic problem. Maybe you can help." "Sure," said Alison. Mrs. Jules always helped the children with their problems. Alison was happy to help. "How do you spell chair?" asked Mrs. Jules. "Chair," answered Alison. "Yes, that's right," said Mrs. Jules. "I knew it wasn't Chare, but I couldn't remember what it was." "That's not an arithmetic problem," said Alison. "That's spelling." "Yes, you're right again," said Mrs. Jules. "I always, excuse me, get the two mixed up." The bell rang. The lunch period was over. Alison could hear the other children running up the stairs. "Alison," said Mrs. Jules, "you learned a very important secret today, and I don't want you to tell any of the other children, not even Rondi." "What was that?" asked Alison. She didn't even know she had learned a secret. She loved secrets. "You learned that children are really smarter than their teachers," said Mrs. Jules. "Oh, that's no secret," said Alison. "Everybody already knows it." All right. And our final story is about Damian. And there's Damian. And Damian is sitting on the stairs. And you might not be able to see it, but he looks worn out and he is sweating. So, why? That's the question. Poor Damian. Damian had hazel eyes with a little black dot in the middle of each of them. The dots were called pupils. So was Damian. He was a pupil in Mrs. Jules's class. Mrs. Jules was about to show the class a movie. She turned out the lights, and when it got dark, Damian's pupils got larger. "Damian," said Mrs. Jules, "run downstairs and ask Louis if he'd like to see the movie with us." Damian ran down the 30 flights of stairs to the playground. He stepped outside as Louis was hooking up a tetherball. "Hey, Louis," Damian called. "Do you want to see a movie in Mrs. Jules's class?" Louis rubbed his chin. "What movie?" he asked. Damian shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know," he said. "I'll be right back." So Damian ran all the way back up the stairs to the 30th story. "Louis wants to know what movie," said Damian. "Does he want to know the name of the movie or what the movie is about?" asked Mrs. Jules. "I don't know. I'll ask him," said Damian. So Damian raced all the way back down the stairs and out to the playground. "Louis, do you want to know the name of the movie or what the movie is about?" he asked. "The name," said Louis. "Okay," said Damian. So Damian hurried back up the 30 flights of stairs. He took the steps 2 at a time. "He wants to know the name," said Damian. "Turtles," said Mrs. Jules. Damian turned around, took a deep breath, then ran back down the stairs. "Turtles," Damian told Louis. "Hey, that might be good," said Louis. "What's it about?" "I'm not sure," said Damian. "I'll find out." Damian raced back up the stairs, but first he stopped for a drink of water. "What's it about, Mrs. Jules?" asked Damian. "Turtles," said Mrs. Jules. Damian rushed back down the stairs to tell Louis. "Turtles," said Damian. "No thanks," said Louis. "I don't like turtles. They're too slow." Damian lowered his head and slowly walked up the 30 flights of stairs. His legs were sore, he could hardly breathe, and his side ached. By the time he got to Mrs. Jules's class, the movie was over. "All right, class," said Mrs. Jules. "I want everybody to take out a piece of paper and a pencil and write something about turtles." Damian had missed the movie, but he still could have written something about turtles. Turtles are too slow. But now he couldn't find his pencil. It just wasn't his day. "What's the matter, Damian?" asked Mrs. Jules. "I can't find my pencil," said Damian. "Class, Damian's pencil is missing," Mrs. Jules announced. "What did it look like, Damian?" she asked. "It was long and yellow," said Damian. "It had a black point at one end and a red eraser at the other." "I found it," said Todd. "Here, by the blackboard." "Yes, that's it," said Damian. "No, there it is in the corner by the wastebasket," said Eric Ovens. Maybe that's it," said Damian. "Here it is," said John. "It's been in my desk the whole time." "No, here it is in my hand," said Joe. "I found it," said Ronnie. "Here it is," said Alison. "I have it," laughed DJ. "I found it," said Myron. "Which one is yours, Damian?" Mrs. Jules asked. Damian studied each pencil. "They all look like mine," he said. Fortunately, at that moment, Louis walked into the classroom. He handed Damian a pencil. "You dropped this when you were telling me about the movie," said Louis. "Thanks," said Damian. "Okay, class," said Mrs. Jules. "So that we have no more mix-ups, I want all of you to write your name on your pencil." Damian spent the rest of the day trying to write his name on his pencil. Damian's pencil couldn't write on itself. It was just like his beautiful hazel eyes with the black dots in the middle. They could see everything except themselves. All right, that's it for today. We have 6 more stories, so I'll do 3 more and 3 more. Hope you're having a good time, and I hope you're enjoying the reading. I'm enjoying reading to you. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.